Okay. So, well, you have the printout in front of you, but I'm also projecting it on the screen so that it comes out on the recording. But we're going to go through this, and this will take most or all of the period. But again, this is part of the review. Okay. Okay. Is this an? Oh, this. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, if you want to pick up a copy of the things. Okay. Yeah, if there were extras, I had more people show up from the 10 o'clock class than I expected. I wasn't trying to make a lot of extra copies of these, so, you know. So, okay. So here's the thing that you want to make sure you note about your exam on Friday. Note that even though your regular class starting time is 11 a.m., the time slot the registrar's office gives you for taking your exam is 10 to 11:50. So it means that our exam begins at 10 o'clock, and you have till 11:50. And so if you're thinking it's a 2-hour slot beginning at 11 and you show up at 20 minutes after, you still have till 11:50. Okay, so, you know, I mean, for all I know, they have an exam scheduled for another class in here at noon, and we, you know. So, okay. And so you want to bring 3 things to the exam. Obviously, your completed test essay, typed double-spaced. And if you're prone to procrastinate, this is not something you want to procrastinate on. As I said, if it's not physically in my hands at the end of the exam period, I'm making no guarantees. You know, it's not, you know, so also you want a number 2 pencil, even though I'll have some pencils. Sometimes mine get a little funky. And of course, if you haven't already bought a Scantron form for it, you know, bring a Scantron form. Probably going to just be 25 questions. Might be 30, but I don't think so. You know, so you'll have more than enough time to get it done, right? Because you got technically 2 hours. And I will stay here till 11:50. Because I've had too many times when somebody comes in huffing and puffing, my car wouldn't start or I missed the bus, and it's 20 minutes before the end of the exam period. Whereas if I had left after everybody finished, you know, within the first 45 minutes, they would have been out of luck. But it's, I will usually stay till the bitter end because really there's more than enough for me to do in just organizing stuff and beginning to grade. Okay, well, and by the way, you want to, if you look at any of those past review sessions, if you haven't done so already, you want to look at the starting points that I list. And I also copied them into Tegrity, although they are not renamed Integrity, you know, but they're all 3 under the December 6th date. You know, in other words, you have to follow the suggestions for when to start it because they cover some stuff that you've already done on test 2, like on empiricism. You know, or like, you know, something you did on test 1. I used to do free will at the beginning of the course, you know, so that's why there's more than one review session there. But but I think you will find them helpful, though, if you go over them. And so, what was the fate of Oedipus? And who predicted it? Who did he go to who revealed his fate? Well,
He learns about the Oracle and Delphi, about like the wealth that his father, he killed his own father and sleep with his own mother.
yes, right. I mean, that would really make your day to learn that, wouldn't it? Not really, right? No, yeah, the oracle at Delphi. Remember, Delphi is a Greek city. There's a temple. There was the ruins are still there. There's a temple of Apollo at Delphi, and the oracle was a priestess, a prophetess, who supposedly gave pronouncements about our fate, for the god Apollo, right? So even Socrates gave credence to the oracle at Delphi, right? So he learns this horrible fate, and what does he do right then and there? Because remember, he's not home. He's out there visiting the oracle, but what does he decide to do to try to avoid this prophesied fate? Right. Well, I mean, he tries to avoid what he thinks is his childhood home and his parents, right, back at the city of Corinth, the same city that the Corinthian letter was written from. And so he says he doesn't return there. He goes to another location. So he says, hey, okay, here's this prophecy that I'm going to kill my dad. Guess what? I'm not going to see my dad again. Right. So now remember, this relates to free will, because the idea is even though he thinks he made free choices that change his fate, what happens that fulfills his fate on the way? Yeah, right. There's this, I guess, intersection where three roads meet. And as I say, this is one of the first recorded Western incidents of road rage, where he meets his father. They, get into a disagreement, and he ends up killing his real biological father. So why does he think? And so he does not end up getting around his fate, but he confirms it. So now his father also visited the oracle, and his father was told basically the mirror image of the other prophecy, right? That he's going to have a child that'll kill him. So what does he do? His wife's pregnant. What do they do with the child? Well, what back then was maybe the effective equivalent, right? In ancient Greece, and I once heard a letter read from a Greek soldier back to his wife who was expecting with their child, right? They wanted a male child. And he said, well, if it turns out to be a female, just expose it to the elements, let it die, and we'll try again when I get back. Infanticide, the killing of infants, was looked upon as morally acceptable in that society. So Oedipus's father takes Oedipus as a baby out to expose him to the elements, but what happens? Well, the father he thinks is his biological father at Corinth saves him, rescues him, raises him as his own child. And so his father thinks he's, and his father's wife Iacasa thinks that they have thwarted the prophecy. The fate that was predicted for them didn't come true. They have free choice to overcome their fate. When in fact, he has not thwarted the prophecy. So Oedipus on the way to, I think, Thessaly, or meets what? Mythical creature. The Sphinx, right? Who gives him a riddle, right? What is it? What in the morning travels on 4 legs, and at noon on 3 legs, and then the evening on right on 2 legs during the day, and in the evening on 3 legs, which turns out to be man in the generic sense himself, right? We crawl on 4 legs as a baby. We walk on 2 most of our lives, and when we're an old man with a cane, 3 legs, right? And the Sphinx, goes and kills itself. Somebody figured it. So he saves people from being hassled by the Sphinx. And what is his reward for doing away with the Sphinx? Pardon? Down the line. But at this point, he is rewarded with the now widowed queen as his wife and part of the rule over the kingdom, for saving. So what has he then done? He has fulfilled the other part of the prophecy without knowing it. He has now married his mother, and they do have children. Now, so the moral of the story is, if something's fated for you, no matter what you do, you're not really making free choices that can enable you to escape your fate. That fate is going to befall you. Whether it's predicted in the stars or by the Greek god, determined by the Greek gods. And, the last part of that has to do with whether you'd want to know your fate if there was one. Iacasa doesn't want to know, even though she suspects that the prophecy may be being fulfilled after all. Whereas Oedipus wants to investigate things. If it's bad, he wants to know. But they both, I think, end up doing themselves in when they find out what has really happened. So that's number 1. And we also discussed the metaphysical notion of fate. Does the position of the stars at your moment of birth determine a fate for you? Because it's the universe, not the choices of the Greek gods, determining that fate, which is the belief of astrology, right? And we saw that defense that a lawyer was going to produce, trying to get his client off, saying that he was going to be a born loser by you want to take a copy of each if you haven't already printed them out on the internet. Okay. He was going to be a born loser because he was born at an exact time and date in the year 1956. So you're the next person. This is a copy of the review sheet. When I'm finished, come up and you can get a copy of the question printout. I didn't want to, be wasteful and print out a lot of extras that we weren't going to use. And I was using the departmental printer, but both in this class and the other, I had a lot more people show up than normally are showing up. So, which I guess is good, but so I've run out of these. But now, on number 2, there's a number of ways you can approach that. But, you know, people today believe in astrology, right? That the stars determine a fate for them. And so they would think even though they're sophisticated, now 21st century people, nonetheless, fate is still there. Or, I mean, some teams, like the Ravens, with all these injuries and somebody scoring 2 touchdowns in 20 seconds on us yesterday, which I hated to see. Remember, I'm from the University of Virginia, and Matt Schaub graduated there, was their quarterback. I'm kind of pulling for the guy, but the rap against him, one of the reasons why he's still not with Houston is he was throwing too many pick sixes, too many, interceptions that turned into immediate touchdowns for the other side. So you hate to see him do that for the Ravens. But at any rate, but you can say, with all this stuff, these injuries and the weird stuff that's happening on the field, I think the Ravens were just fated this year to be in the cellar, whereas I think in the last World Series, wasn't it Kansas City or something? I mean, whoever won the thing really almost viewed themselves as a team of destiny. We did for Super Bowl 35 for the Ravens. People think, hey, man, we are fated to do it, guy. And yet a lot of people today would think that the notion that fate has anything to do with our lives, is just basically superstition. So at any rate, so there's a number of ways you can approach question 2. Is there any good reason why a mature, intelligent person should take fate seriously? Number 3, how would the hard determinists reply to each of the following criticisms? If you understand this, now remember, the hard determinist position, who were the people that we studied that took that position? We looked at Paul Henri de Holbach, right? And also Laplace. So hard determinism is a view that the atoms, that the universe is such that everything we do is determined by prior causes, that we're just a part of nature, and the laws of nature are inexorable, and we cannot get around them, and if we're part of nature, everything we do this afternoon is determined, just like everything that would happen to this cup of coffee this afternoon is predetermined by the laws of nature. That a causal past determines a unique causal future. And so how does this affect our common sense, everyday belief that we're making free choices? Because most of us do. In other words, when de Holbach tries to be shocking and says there's a line that the laws of nature has described for us on the ground, and we can't depart from it any single instant of our lives. Let's recirculate this. If you could pass that down to that end and just have it circulate around so that people don't have to do it at the end. We resist that. Say, no, I can make free choices. So look at A. When I make a choice, I could have chosen differently. Well, for the hard determinist, if I thought I had a real A or B choice in what I was going to do, that is basically what? My belief that I have that is for them an utter illusion. If I chose B under the same causal conditions, I will always choose B. A was never a live option for me, even though I thought it was. So I could have chosen differently. I've run out of the other one. I didn't make enough. More people are coming out of the... Well, it's good to see everyone here, but more people have shown up today than I expected, which is good. But I didn't want to have a bunch of, extras laying around. So at any rate, but these are on the internet, in the question, pull, and review sheet options, and they have been there since Friday. You know that already if you have Blackboard synced to your phone, so that you get a notice when something new comes on to Blackboard. If you don't, why don't you? You ought to. Anyway. Okay. B, the fact that I have to deliberate before making decisions proves that I'm not determined. Well, again, that we think we're really deliberating between A and B for the hard determinist is an illusion. If we chose B, we were always determined by the past, by our causal past and the laws of nature to choose B. And the fact that we think we can genuinely deliberate and make a free choice is just, again, an illusion. We don't. Now, another argument often made for libertarianism for the fact that we have genuine free choices is, while I can predict what's going to happen, how the laws of nature are going to affect the coffee in this cup, if I leave it here all afternoon, right, we know by the laws of physics it's going to seek equilibrium with the surrounding air temperature. It's going to seek the temperature of the air, which means getting cold relative to the temperature of the air. I can predict that by the laws of nature. I can't predict what you're going to do this afternoon. So does that mean that you're really making free choices, whereas the coffee in the cup is governed by the laws of nature? Not for the hard determinist, right? You have to say, well, who is not able to predict what you're going to do this afternoon? Maybe you can't. Number one, you don't have enough information. But the view of hard determinism is that the laws of nature are so strict and so exceptionless in the way they work that in principle, if we knew all of the causes working to affect your choice, we could in principle predict your future behavior. And the point of Laplace's demonic creature is to give you a being that is capable, one, of knowing the positions of all the atoms and molecules in the universe, which you don't, or I don't, at this time, and is also a quick enough calculator that he can predict 3 hours from now what's that going to be, and can predict what you're going to choose to do 3 hours from now. So Laplace's demon could predict it, but you can't. So the hard determinist would say, the fact that I can't predict your actions doesn't mean that hard determinism is wrong. If Laplace's demon were here, he could. Now, of course, Laplace is writing hundreds of years ago. If he were writing today, I think he'd probably give us a story about a humongous supercomputer with the position of all the electrons and atoms in the universe programmed into it, and it's a lightning fast calculator because it's a supercomputer. But back then, he had to imagine a being with those capabilities. So basically, for the hard determinists, all of these would be illusions. Now, I come at Leopold and Loeb in a little bit of a different slant here. I ask you, what might a compatibilist say? Remember, Clarence Darrow, who is trying to get Leopold and Loeb, trying to get their sentence commuted by saying they're not entirely responsible for what they do, is coming at this from the point of a hard determinist. He's essentially saying the causes in their background, especially those environmental and genetic causes, in their family background, in their genetic history, they are what determine them to choose to commit this crime. And Darrow is saying they really had no choice, so they at least should not be held so responsible for what they did that they should be given the death penalty, that their sentence should be commuted. And it was commuted. But now, soft determinists accept determinism. They, for both hard determinists and soft determinists, a unique causal past determines a unique history. In other words, if all of the causes that led up to my choice are the same, and I chose B last time in a situation, even though I was deliberating about A, a soft determinist has to also say that given the same causal past, I must make the same choice. But soft determinists are compatibilists, not incompatibilists. Hard determinists are incompatibilists. They say the fact that our every decision is determined by our causal past, by the laws of nature, the fact that that happens for the hard determinists means we're not morally or should not be held legally responsible for what we do. Okay? In other words, they're incompatibilists because the hard determinists say determinism is incompatible with the claim that we have enough free will for moral responsibility. Whereas compatibilists say, even though I would always make the same choice given my causal history, I nonetheless can look at the idea of free choice in a way that makes me responsible for my actions. So compatibilists basically give us enough room for moral and legal responsibility by tweaking in a special way the notion of freedom of choice. What they say is, my real free choices, and by the way, let me point out something that might be confusing. Under compatibilism, I use the initials TC. That stands for traditional compatibilism. That goes back to a different text I used that made a distinction between the compatibilism we looked at and a deeper version, more complex version of it. All we looked at is what is called TC, traditional compatibilism. Traditional compatibilism says, even if everything I do is determined by my causal past, nonetheless, if what I did was prompted by some inner psychological state, some belief I have, or some desire or want I have, then if that's what determined me to make the choice, then I chose freely and I should be held morally and legally responsible for my choice. So to get back to question 4, I take the compatibilist stance on this and says a lot of the evidence did point to the fact that these guys voluntarily wanted to do what they did. They wanted the challenge of committing the perfect murder, right? They wanted to do poor Bobby Franks in. And so if that's the case, if their own wants made them do that, shouldn't we assume that the compatibilists are right? And since they did what they wanted to do, they were entirely responsible for their actions and should be held responsible for them both legally and morally. Well, I mean, that's a position you can take on this, which would be to take the soft determinist view, the compatibilist view. Remember, compatibilism, soft determinism, here refer to the same thing. So, so I asked you to weigh in on, do you think the compatibilists give us a way to look at this as making Leopold and Loeb more responsible than Clarence Darrow wanted to make them as a hard determinist for what they did? Or do you agree with Darrow? So that's what's going on in question 4. It's a long question. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Again, for folks coming in, I printed out what I thought was going to be enough, but I've had more people show up today than I expected in both classes, which I like to see, but if you came in late, you missed the printouts. These are on the internet. If you want to follow me up to 6:27 right after class, I can go print out some more for you. Otherwise, you'll have to look at them online, and they're in the question pool and review sheet option. Also, those past review sessions, I also copied into Tegrity, but I did not rename them. So all 3 of them are there under December 6th. But you just have to click on them. So, if you have trouble opening up the files from YouTube, they are in Tegrity. Okay. Well, any questions about 1 through 4? So remember, for folks who came in, your exam is this Friday, okay, which is, I guess, the first day of exams. And the thing that you want to take particular note of is our time slot is from 10 to 11:50. So if you show up at 11, then you're only going to have 50 minutes to get it done, which most people are still going to be able to do, right? Because it's just going to be probably 25 questions. I don't think it's going to be 30. On a Scantron, want to make sure you bring a Scantron number 2 pencil in your essay. But if you think, well, I have a 2-hour time slot beginning at 11, and you show up at 11:30, no, you have a 20-minute time slot. Because I'm not going to say an extra hour just because you didn't pay attention to the time slot. And remember, I don't give you these time slots. The registrar's office does. As they like to say in the government, these decisions are made far above my pay grade. And as an adjunct professor, just about everybody here is above my pay grade. So even the secretaries of the cafeteria employees. So, that's not saying much. Okay, well, we went over utilitarianism fairly recently, and I'm going to go over the review sheet next time, but real quickly, just to number 5, what it asks you to do is look at that example that I took from the Encyclopedia of Philosophy on whether or not, on using Bentham's hedonistic calculus of pleasures, hedonic calculus. I think your book even uses another term. It doesn't matter what you call it. Basically, in 5, what I'm asking you to do is, hey, have some fun. Make up your own example of somebody trying to make an A or B decision using utilitarian reasoning in the way that the uncle does about whether to take his nephew to the circus Saturday or stay home and read a book, or in the way we have to do about the Bakun Dam. And give us your own example, and also point out some of the criticisms of using the hedonistic calculus. I mean, very hard to know and predict what others' pains and pleasures are going to be. Pains and pleasures are not open to public inspection, so how do I even know what they are now? Also, you can't specify a countable unit, right? I mean, you don't know how much of something you have until you know what's to count as having one of that thing. Well, if you can't, in any exact way, specify what it means to have one hedon's worth of pleasure, how do you know how many hedons you have? So number 5. And if you look at number 6, again, remember there's a link in the announcements if you've been a stranger to Blackboard. To the video if you missed it in class. By the way, if you have any extra credits, would like to receive them by Wednesday. If you owe me any back work, like essays or a term paper, the last day to get that in is Friday. It needs to be in my hands by the end of that exam period. Yes, I'm going to be around Monday, but after Monday, after the 10 o'clock classes exam, the next time I am scheduled to be on campus is at the beginning of spring semester at the end of January, okay? So basically 6 asks you to essentially, discuss the whole issue of building a dam like the Bakun Dam. Remember, there's 2 ways you can approach that with utilitarian reasoning. You can go from the hedonistic perspective, balancing out the increased happiness for the greater amount of society and having a hydroelectric dam, versus the unhappiness of the 10,000 displaced native peoples and animals in the forest. So you can balance out happiness versus unhappiness to decide whether to build the dam or not. Or you can take the cost-benefit analysis view and interpret the right thing to do as what gives society whether the project is going to have enough benefits economically to justify its costs. And if so, then morally we're okay with going ahead with it. So you can take either perspective in 6. And let's see. Yeah, all I say is to make a decision from a utilitarian perspective. So those are the two perspectives. Again, do not worry about anything in the utilitarianism PowerPoint about act and rule utilitarianism. It's in there because I use those in separate situations where I'm doing a whole ethics course and I go into things in more detail, but I don't do that in intro. Okay, so so see you Wednesday, and we'll begin going over the review session. But I wanted to review and also let you know what I'm thinking about. Now, remember, I'm recording this, so if you missed some of it, or if you want to review what I said again, you know, it'll be there in integrity. If you missed the roll. Yeah, I think pretty much. I mean, yeah, it's the Sartre PowerPoint, the utilitarianism PowerPoint, and that free will PowerPoint. Yeah.